This is part 2 of today's adventure. Part 1, I actually dropped the subframe this morning, and this afternoon I went ahead and disassembled it. Disassembly of the subframe is not particularly difficult, it's just time consuming. There are a lot of nuts and bolts that need to be undone. The first thing I did was remove the differential. You've got these two in-hex bolts on the rear end. They go into rubber mounts, which I'll be changing at a later date. I do have those, but I'll be cleaning up the subframe first before the new ones go in. And the front also has a single rubber mount as well. I've also got all of this new as well. Single in that it's one bolt, but there's actually two rubber mounts on top of each other that go into the subframe there. That's what it looks like. And that washer actually goes on the top side of the differential arm there, not on the underside. So this is what the subframe looked like. I had a bit more of a look at it to see if it was the original one to the car. I still can't ascertain whether it is or not. These nuts have already been disconnected, but the actual shaft can get stuck inside the flange, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm just freeing it up with my gear puller. I did tap it through with a hammer and a socket to get to this point here, and then once you've got it like that, you can just pull the subframe away and the differential stays behind. Now I just went ahead and removed the wheel carriers on the left and right side. Nothing particularly difficult here. As I said, it's just a lot of nuts and bolts that need to be undone. One of them does the toe-in adjustment for the rear end. That does have a spline-headed bolt. I've got the tools for that, so that wasn't a problem at all. The rest of it is nothing special. Just disconnect and remove. Just have a look at how screwed these lower outer joints were. These are kind of like a ball joint. There is a rubber boot on each end of this joint and it is filled with grease. The rubber has perished many years ago and there's no grease whatsoever, and they basically just flop around with minimal effort at all. So that would have been making quite a lot of noise, I would imagine. Knocking and rattling and squeaking. Not good. Of course I have the special tool for pressing that in. I don't know of any other way of doing it. I guess you could with a nut and bolt and some various sockets, but I just ended up buying the special tool when I did my last car. And there's just a closer look of those joints that are completely screwed. Now you do not need special tools to remove the flange. You do need a press. As far as I'm concerned, you could probably get away with a slide hammer. I don't know. I'm not going to bother trying. You may have noticed that I packed out the space between the brake shield and that arm with a nut. I didn't want to bend the brake shield, that's just to give it support. And yeah, just push the flange out with no problem at all. It does destroy the bearing in the process. The inner race comes out with the flange, but that's not a problem. I knew that would happen. It actually mentions a great likelihood of that happening in the service manual. And those snap rings are quite annoying to remove. They're like the world's strongest snap rings. And I did get a personal injury when I removed those. One of many today. And this is just the removal of the bearing. It's just as easy, if not more easy than the flange. When you've got a press, everything's pretty easy, to be honest. This is not even anything special, this press. It's just a Chinesey one. Like most of my tools, I don't spend a fortune on tools. It's just Chinese crap. A couple of $100 I think I spent on this press, and it's been the best thing I've ever bought as far as tools are concerned, because I've always got something to use it for. I've had it for more than 10 years now and I've never stopped using it. So 124, 140, etc. rear bearings, no problem with this setup. That inner race, I don't have the fancy tool for pulling that off. That's several $100s as well. What I do is just grind it down until it's paper thin and then smack it till it cracks, and you can pull it off pretty easily. Any high spots you create in the process, you just grind down, so that flange is good to go. So this is the carnage left over from today's activities, and I'll start cleaning all of this stuff up and assembling later.